following program is sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Welcome to About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments, surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared in the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
So it is Saturday, and we are talking about money on the radio station, The Answer. So we can say this is The Answer about money. Hopefully, you learn a lot today. I've got a special guest who has a great story to tell. You want to hear what he has to say? But I want to start, and, well, before I get to what I start, I want to tell you about how we're going to end. We're going to end with buying slow, selling fast, part of the studies that have been done. Anyway, we'll get to that later in the program, but I want to start. A couple years ago, I had a company on called VoiceBox, and what they were doing is taking information, because when people talk, and to interpret that, going into a digital setup like Alexa, the Apple or Siri or one of the other devices, when you're talking about different words going in and translating and going into digital format, there's a big difference. When you talk about volume, are you talking about a container volume? Are you talking about the volume on the TV or the radio? Are you talking about volume in other ways? So doing language and interpreting language is also an issue, but we've seen a lot of that overcome now when we're talking about things like Alexa and Siri and some of the other voice-activated technology. But I want to talk about it in a completely different context. And we're talking about it in terms of an issue going on where Japan is actually leading the work. In Japan, men have an average life expectancy of 80 and women 87. And that's expected to raise in the next few years to 84 and 91. Today, in Japan, over 25% of the Japanese are over 65. And by 2050, it's expected to be over 39%. It's not hard to see when the Japanese will be almost 50% over 65. And as they reach the older age, they're going to need caretakers. They have a very limited immigration. In the U.S., we've seen a lot of focus on what's happening with immigration and slowing down immigration. But a lot of the immigrants that are coming in are actually performing caretaker work. My mother-in-law went through that's at Providence, Mount St. Vincent in West Seattle, where a lot of the caretakers in that facility were actually first-time Americans. They'd gotten their American citizenship, but they had immigrated into the U.S. They were low-paying jobs, and when you think about what they do, I was really surprised. Changing bedpans, cleaning messy beds, doing that kind of work. But in Japan, the issue is even more because they don't have immigration, they don't allow it, and they're expecting that they will need 4 million caretakers by 2025. That's only 5 or 6 years from now. And right now, they have only 1.5 million. So what do? It's a low-pay job. In those jobs, it's high turnover and a high injury. So what's happening right now is they're looking at the future of caretakers being not human beings, but being robots. Think about that. Robots to be human caretakers. Toyota actually now is manufacturing 4 types of robots today. 4 types of robots. The first is a human support robot, which assists in nursing and independence in the daily life. That's the focus of that robot. They can pick up and carry things and even individuals. So if somebody is bedridden, they can actually pick up the person and carry them to the toilet. I mean, that's a significant impact. They can do preventive care. They can make sure that the patients and the elderly are actually taking their medications. They can bring the medications. They can measure out the medications. They're really doing elder care, and not just in elder care facilities. The idea is to have these robots. Some of the robots you can have at home. But when you think about it, most of the robots are pretty mechanical. And it's, if you have an Echo at Alexa, it's a thing that sits on a counter, and you can talk to it and you can say play music, or you can talk and ask for what the weather's going to be. But it's really a mechanical thing. Socially, it doesn't work. So Toyota's come up with what they call the social robot. And it's coated in a cloth, a very soft, furry cloth that you can actually hold and cuddle with. And it can actually monitor health. You can engage this in a conversation. So you can talk about the weather. You can talk about sports. You can talk about family. You can talk about music. You can talk whatever. And this little robot will talk and carry on a conversation. And the idea is to prevent the health care and monitor the health care. That's going on with a social robot. They also have one that's a rehabilitation robot called WeWalk. It's designed to assist and rehab people who have leg paralysis due to a stroke or other activities. And it will actually learn how you're doing exercise-wise and will monitor. Every single person gets a separate monitoring device. So it's not like going to the gym where you stand on a treadmill and you can do your own thing. This will actually be programmed in such a way that it learns how you need to rehabilitate and your progress, and it will monitor and continue that program. And not only that, all these robots will send the information to your medical care providers so that they have an immediate access to know how you're doing and what you're doing. They have a fourth robot, which is geared for mechanical things. Fingertip control. It can pick up things. It can set things down. It can play the violin. It can play the trumpet. It's all about how the robot is controlled. All those things are going on, and that's just from Toyota. There are functions that are addressed. They're programming these robots to do the dishes. Soon they'll be able to cook meals and bring you your meals. That's all coming with the robots. So if you decide you want scrambled eggs, the robot will go to the refrigerator, open the door, take out a couple of eggs, crack those eggs, deposit the shells in waste, put the eggs into a bowl, mix them up, add a little bit of milk, start the stove, put the pan on the stove, put the eggs in, and the robot will ask you if you want softly cooked eggs or hard-cooked eggs or how you would like those eggs. And it will cook the eggs to your flavor, pick up the pan, empty them onto a plate, bring you the plate, bring you the utensils to do. We'll probably make the toast and butter the toast. We'll probably make the coffee and flavor the coffee with cream or no cream, flavor the coffee with Splenda or sugar or whatever else you use in the coffee or nothing. Bring all of that to you and bring you a tray, bring you a setup so that you have something to eat with, so that you can leisurely finish your breakfast. And then when you're done, you can call the robot. It'll pick up the tray. It'll pick up the dishes. It'll put the dishes in the dishwasher. It'll start the dishwasher. It'll wash the dishes. It'll wash the pans. It'll take care of all of that in a function. And not only that, you don't have to program anything. All you have to do is say, I'd really like scrambled eggs and toast this morning and my coffee. And the robot will do that. That's the place where we're coming, you know. And at the University of Tokyo, they're building robots over and above that to do other aspects as well. You know, those same robots, by the way, will brush your teeth, they'll help you go to the bathroom, and they'll take care of what you do. Add to that a toilet that's made in the UK, and I talk about this fairly often because I find it really humorous. But whatever you deposit in the toilet, it will analyze, tell you what you're missing in your diet, order that from the store, and the store will deliver what you need for your diet. Talk about healthcare and what you need. For me, it would probably limit the food because I'm overweight, and it would tell me I need to lose weight. You know, all that's coming, and all that's going to be done robotically. But that's only part of the robots that are happening. We're seeing more and more different types of robots. Japan is leading the industry, but we're going to see more robots coming in different aspects. I find that it's most interesting just to look at the caretaker in Japan because those robots are special built and they're doing tasks which are so important. And we've got more to come. I want to talk a little more about some of the other types of robots that are coming because I think it's an incredible industry. It's going to displace a lot of things that are being done today. Stay with me. Don't go away. We've got more to come. And you'll want to hear about my guests too.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about robots, and I started talking about caretaker robots because it's a very fascinating field for me. It's something because in this program is to put you, the listener, ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve, so you can understand what's coming and be ready for it and be investing in what's happening and will be happening rather than looking backwards. So I want to take it beyond just the caretaker robot because at the University of Tokyo, they've developed a robot called Kengoro. Kengoro is 5'6" tall. He's 125 pounds. He has 160 motors. He's driven, of course, by a computer. He can mimic human movements, including doing push-ups, pull-ups, back bends, and he has 6 times the degree of movement as compared to humans. So far more movement than humans. You know, it wasn't that long ago we had this movie come out with C-3PO and R2-D2, you know, those little robots that spoke. You know, we're moving in that direction. And we're moving in robots that have greater mobility, greater strength than humans. And if you look at the total robotic field, there's actually 6 kind of robots. Industrial robots, which are the most basic. They're usually stationary or semi-stationary. They do repetitive tasks. They'll paint cars. They'll bolt on wheels. The thing is, they're free from external influences, which disrupt routines. They show up for work on time, and they're always ready to go to work. They're not tardy. They don't take coffee breaks or lunch breaks. And they can manage software as well as physical construction. They have algorithms working. So you have the industrial type robots. Those are going to be expanded and increased, and we're going to see more mobility coming from the industrial robots. That's on the horizon, not very long away. You have a second type of robot called the exploration. Think about the Mars rover, remotely operated vehicle. I mean, we're operating and driving that vehicle from Earth. You drive it left, you drive it right, you can raise it, lower it, you can pick up samples, you can analyze samples, you can take pictures, all those simple probes to an autonomous spacecraft. So you can send a spacecraft into space, send it to Mars, send it to Venus, send it to Mercury, and control the entire thing from the earth. There are a third type of robot is the consumer type robot, the Roomba, that will vacuum your house, set it up, and it will go and program its way to actually vacuum your house. We're moving more and more rapidly to an Internet of Things where things are combined into computers and they do elementary tasks. They'll become more and more complicated, and we're combining voice commands with it. Think of the Echo and Alexa. And we do have an Alexa. We turn her off all the time. One interesting aspect, there are not many babies today that are named Alexa anymore, but that's, I don't imagine there's many named Siri either, but okay. Okay. There are medical robots coming as well, a fourth area. We had on this program the inventor of the Da Vinci robotic surgery that's done for prostate, hysterectomies, kidneys, autonomous arms that help a surgeon perform very delicate surgeries. The Da Vinci robotic surgery, you can actually feel the pushback when you're talking about doing a surgery and cutting tissue. There's a pushback from that tissue. With the Da Vinci robotic robot, you can actually feel the pushback. You can actually feel how it's working. Takes a long time to learn, for a surgeon to learn how to do it, but there are surgeons in Seattle who have performed up to 2,000, maybe more than 2,000 of these surgeries. The recovery is much faster, and it's very straightforward. They're also making robots that are very miniaturized. There was a show, I don't know, it's a movie made maybe 20, 30 years ago about a small robot. They miniaturized people and they put them into a thing that put them into a blood vessel. It was a movie. But that is coming. They're now beginning to make robots that they can put into the body to move around. They're doing actual surgeries, doing heart ablations by putting cameras into a person's heart and doing mechanical ablations to a heart. All that's coming. All those are robotic things. The fourth one is aerospace. We're able to now fly planes. We're able to fly drones remotely so that you can take off, you can fly a flying vehicle, remotely with no pilots. We're seeing more and more of those coming. And we're seeing aquatic type robots, deep sea exploration. We're able to go places where humans can't go because of the pressures. We're sending robotic things there. And of course, the seventh one I think of as the autonomous vehicles. I do have a Tesla. And when I got the Tesla, it did not have automatic parking or automatic driving. Sunday mornings at 1:40 a.m., they download software, and now I have auto parking. I have auto drive. If you're in a really tight spot, you can get out of your car, park the car using your phone, and when you come to get the car, you press fetch, or I don't remember the command, but the car will back out and come to you. I mean, these things are happening, and this is something which will continue to happen as we go forward. It's following a very specific pattern of digitalization, of deception. Most people don't realize what's really happening. This is happening faster and faster, and most people don't realize as we're going along all the digitalization that's happening. It's causing disruption because entire industries are going to be disrupted by this. You can buy, the idea of this program is to put you ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve. And in terms of robotics are coming and taking over and doing things which humans normally did before or machines did before. And it's disrupting. 45%. The estimates are that 45% of all current jobs are at risk of being replaced, most of those by robots, including my industry. We're talking about robo-advisors, and I've talked about this again and again and again. You can do almost everything most financial advisors do with doing a robo-advisor, and you can do it at 1/10 of the cost. I mean, think about it. Why do you need a human advisor unless you get exceptional performance in your account? That's what I do. But most of what financial advisors are doing, the financial planning, robo-advisors can do that. Selecting a portfolio that's going to underperform the market, which is what most people have anyway, robo-advisors can do that. Doing asset allocation, robo-advisors can do that. If you want true value, that's what I do. But that's another story. I mean, think of all the changes that we've seen happening just in the last 20 or 30 years in terms of newspapers, radio stations, music. All those things are happening, and they're going to continue to happen. My idea in this program is to put you ahead of the curve instead of behind the curve. And so it seems only appropriate that my guest today is here to talk about computers and cybersecurity. So I want to introduce Alex Ganaris of Polyverse. Welcome to the program, Alex.
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't we start with your background?
Certainly. Just a fellow who grew up in Alabama and had a number of different jobs before winding my way here to Seattle. Worked at Los Alamos National Laboratories, and then came out here to Seattle to work for Microsoft. Did 17 years there. Was probably most famous for being Bill Gates' technology advisor. And for anybody using a Windows computer, I was part of the team that worked on the typing codes. Any place you type on a Windows computer is some of the code that I worked on.
So I do that.
Yeah.
And I have the computers in my office, at home.
Yeah, so typing, copy, paste, drag, drop, all that stuff that I worked on. And these days I'm running a company called Polyverse. We do cybersecurity. So your comments on robots and robo-advisors is incredibly timely, because if we don't solve the cybersecurity problem, those robots are going to be a problem.
They are going to be a problem. The science fiction movies about the robots taking over the world.
Yes, exactly. And since I guess this is going to be online, I, for one, welcome our robotic overlords, just having that on record.
So anyway, let's get into Polyverse. We're going to come to a commercial break here very shortly. So right after the commercial break, we're going to talk about cybersecurity and what Polyverse does. I think it's very unique and very special. I think it's really crucial when we're talking about things like robotics, things like the Internet of Things, when we're talking about the things that are happening today with computers, the break-ins, the hacking. You know, let me give a little more background. I talked about caretakers. Think if somebody hacked into the caretakers and deprogrammed the caretakers. Or if you have a robotic caretaker that says, "You want scrambled eggs? That'll be $5. I mean, those kinds of things can happen in the future. So what Polyverse is doing is very, very important. And I'll let Alex tell you about it right after the commercial break. If you missed this program or some of the other programs, you can find it on YouTube. You can also find the podcast on our website. Check it out. And we're coming to this commercial break. Don't go away. We've got a lot more to cover. And we've got important things to hear about.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I'm here with Alex
Ganaris
from Polyverse. Thanks for helping me out. So we've been talking about Polyverse and cybersecurity. So fill us in more about computers and what's going on and where you are.
Certainly. So one of the challenges today in cybersecurity is a lot of the traditional cybersecurity defenses that people are deploying quite simply aren't working effectively. If you sort of take a look at the news, it seems like every week these days there's some announcement of some major hack. And you just have to sort of take a pause and say, what's going on, right? Collectively, as Western civilization, we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year on firewalls and antivirus and all these different products, yet we're still getting hacked. So, if we want to realize that future you've been talking about in this program, we have to solve this.
Yes.
And what we're trying to do at Polyverse is actually fundamentally solve the root cause of cyber attacks. And one of the ways we do this is we look at it as an economic problem. This may surprise a lot of folks who sort of think, oh, this is very high tech and a lot of technology, but actually cybersecurity is really an economic problem at the core.
So explain what you mean by an economic problem.
So it kind of gets rooted in the mathematics of how computers and software works. There was a famous computer scientist, British computer scientist named Alan Turing, and skipping the equations, he basically formulated a thesis that said all computers will have bugs. We cannot create a perfect computer that does everything exactly right all the time. There's always going to be some kind of error, and that's exactly what the attackers. If you're a bad actor, a malevolent actor, and you're trying to hack a computer system, you look for those flaws, and that's what you exploit to create your virus, whether it's a WannaCry virus or taking over Equifax or what have you. And so if everything is going to have bugs, that means everything's going to be hackable. The real question is, what's the payoff of those attacks? And today the payoff is quite huge because every computer system is a clone of each other. Imagine if you had you were just a house robber and you wanted to go rob a house, and every house you went to had exactly the same layout, had the exact same lock on the door, had exactly the same layout of rooms. The wallet you're trying to steal is always in the master bedroom on the right-hand dresser in the top drawer. And it's always the same. And the security guard walks the same path every time. And every house in the entire world is the same exact thing.
Sounds easy to do.
Yeah, that'd be super easy. And it wouldn't matter how fancy your lock was, whether it was a single tumbler, a double tumbler, or whatever. Like, you'd figure out how to pick the lock, right? And so when you think about computers, it doesn't matter how fancy your traditional defenses are in, say, a Windows computer, because as an attacker, I can find one of those bugs. And there are literally millions of unfixed bugs in Windows and Linux and so forth. We've actually done that analysis and have it up on our website. So there's millions of bugs to choose from. I can find that bug that I can take advantage of, and then I can take over 1 billion Windows computers, 5 billion Linux computers. And so when you have that 1,000,000,000 to 1 payoff, the economics greatly favor the attacker, because it just doesn't matter how hard it is to hack if you're standing still.
Yeah. So
the solution is don't stand still. Don't be the same. Don't be a clone. We want to change the economics of the attacks. And just like, every house is different, or just like in biology, how our different DNA gives us a lot of diversity as a human species and as almost all biological species, we create unique computers. Every computer protected by Polyverse runs the same, performs the same. It looks like a Linux computer, looks like a Windows computer. As the good guy or gal in the world, you can't tell the difference. But we've changed the underlying DNA, the underlying ones and zeros and binaries of the code. So every computer is unique on the inside. The net result of that is the exploits and these viruses that attackers are trying to run against your computer, they quite simply fail. They just don't even run because you don't know what it is you're attacking.
Let's back up a minute.
Yeah.
So a computer has very few real functions, right?
Yes, sir.
How many functions do they have?
Well, there's a couple of hundred total if you sort of look at the core of a computer, so the functions of a chip. But when you get down to the ones that really matter, it's about 6 functions.
Yeah.
You add, subtract, multiply, divide, just math. And then you can put data into memory and take data out of memory. And from that, we get all the robots you were talking about. We get Fortnite, we get Siri, all the amazing things computers are doing basically boil down to addition and subtraction.
And ones and zeros.
And ones and zeros, yes, sir. That's all ones and zeros.
Can do.
Yep.
So how do you make something different if that's basically all there is with a computer?
So again, we go back to sort of fundamental mathematics. And I have a fourth grader right now myself, and so this is actually fourth grade math. You think about all the different ways you can add and subtract numbers. If you want to get to the number 42, you can do 21 plus 21, you can do 20 plus 22, you can do 50 minus 8, a lot of different ways to get to the number 42. And so if a computer is running entirely on sort of mathematical principles, well, we can use those same mathematical principles to create diversity in the way we get to the same answer. And that's exactly what we do. We change the math of how the computer is operating so that every computer gets to the same answer and gets to the correct answer, but through a different path.
So that might correct one bug, but does it correct all the bugs then?
So it doesn't actually correct any bugs, and that's the trick. So what we want to do, and the way to address cybersecurity is to change the economics. Because right now we're in a world where, as the attacker, it's break once, run once. I can go buy a Windows computer, go download a Linux computer, what have you, and it doesn't matter whether it takes me a day, 10 days, a year, $10 million to go hack a computer. And if you look at some of the hacks that have gone on, like the WannaCry hack that was particularly problematic a couple years ago against Windows computers, I personally studied the source code to that attack. It was extremely sophisticated. The people who wrote it were very smart. They were professionals, and there was probably millions of dollars spent to go create that virus. But who cares? Because you get 1 billion computers. The payoff is there. What happens if it takes $1 million and you can only hack one computer?
It doesn't.
Right. Just the economics don't work anymore.
It's the
and that's the whole idea.
The Nigerian scam.
It's exactly the Nigerian scam issue.
400 million invites saying, I have a rich uncle. All you got to do is give me your bank account and $5,000, and I will give you millions in return. You send out 1 million of those emails, and if you only get 10 responses, you still make a lot of money.
Exactly.
So if you send out to 1 billion computers and only a few come through, it's the Nigerian scam done with a bug.
Except the Nigerian scam, it's the same economics. I mean, these attackers are working the same economics as the Nigerian scam, right? They're trying to, it has to be a profitable business for them, even if they're operating for political means, as some of the stuff we've seen with the elections. Somebody's still footing the bill for all that interference, right? So there has to be an ROI. But in the case of if you change around and create this diversity in the computers, you can send out literally quadrillions of attacks, and none of them are going to work. It's not a 1 in a million; it's a 1 in 8 quadrillion chance.
Yeah.
So they're literally more. That's more than there are grains of sand in the world.
So you talk about protecting computers, making each computer unique. Can you make 1 billion computers unique?
Yes, sir. That's what we do.
Okay.
Yeah, we make every computer unique, and it's all behind the scenes. We literally change the DNA.
So how much is the cost of this?
It varies. Our starting price is $10 a month per computer.
That's
so we
awesome.
try to make it very, very affordable. We're on everything from tiny Internet of Things devices to million server deployments in the cloud, to a lot of government work that I can't really talk about on this program. But we protect a wide range of computers.
So tell people how they can find out about you. What's your website? How would they contact you? How can they get set up to do polyverse protection?
Yeah, just go to polyverse.com. All the information is there on our website, or you can email me directly, alex@polyverse.com.
Perfect. And say it again, just for the people that have not taken down the information.
That's right. You can go to polyverse.com, polyverse.com, and you can email me at alex@polyverse.com.
Extremely important, extremely necessary. This is something that is coming. It needs to happen. It truly does. And the more computers we have, the more Internet of Things, the greater the issue is going to be.
Absolutely.
So the protection is really important to do.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me on the program, Mike.
Thanks for being here. We're going to come back. We're coming to a commercial break. Don't go away because we've got more to come. We're going to be talking about buying slow, selling fast. New book out talking about this, but I can illustrate from our own example, from what we know as well. So don't go away. We've got more to talk about, something that will help you in your investments as well. Be right back.
More about money coming up with Mike Adams on AM 1590, The Answer. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. About Money continues. Remember the website, adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I want to talk about this whole process of buying and selling stocks. When you talk about stocks have a value and a price, the way I look at it. The value is what it's worth. The price is what people are willing to pay. Bernard Baruch was one of the great investors from the 1930s and 40s. And he was the one that stated, and now Art Cashin that you see on CNBC every once in a while, Payne Weber, UBS, Art Cashin paraphrased it saying, made it simple to understand what Baruch said. He said, the market is a perception market. If it believes that 2 + 2 = 5, it'll pay 4 3/4 for it all day long. And my corollary is that if it believes that 2 + 2 = 3, what they bought at 4 3/4, they'll sell at 3 1/4 all day long. It's the way in which you have to make money. You have to buy low, sell high. We all understand that. And yet most people execute by buying high, selling low. My process for picking stocks, and I want to illustrate this whole process because there's a new book out called Buying Slow, Selling Fast. The thesis of the book is that people spend a lot of time buying stocks and picking the stocks, but very little time in terms of selling. So I want to talk about my process in that because I have a tendency to do that as well. It's one of those things where you don't really think about it very much until you read something about it. So my process is pretty straightforward. I look at 30 or 40 stocks every month. From that, I will look at the financials on 8 or 9. And from those 8 or 9, I will pick 1 or 2. I'll read the 10Ks, the 10Qs. I'll look at the internet, find out about them. There was a time in which I used to talk to company managements, and I've given up on that because I've never seen a company management that said, we're in deep trouble. We've got all these problems. We just want to disclose that we don't think we're making our earnings. We've got negative growth. We've got negative earnings. If this keeps going the same way, we're going to be bankrupt. No, what they always tell you is things are great. Even when you can see things aren't great, they'll say, we're in a turnaround phase, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. So I've given up talking to managements. I end up looking at the numbers, drilling down the 10Ks, 10Qs, 1 or 2 a month. And then I only do 1 or 2 trades a year. And one of the stocks has been in my portfolio since 1996. I will stay for a long time, probably 4 or 5 years. But when it comes time to sell, I have a tendency not to go through the same process. I have a tendency to change that. So In 1970, Eugene Fama came out with the efficient market hypothesis, saying that prices reflect the value of the stocks. Price and value were exactly the same. Even if some investors traded irrationally, sophisticated experts would trade against them and eliminate any temporary mispricings. That's what Fama said. And he had a large database, and lots of papers demonstrated since then that investors tend to have systemic or systematic biases. They tend to be overconfident, they tend to be sensation-seeking, and limited attention. And those studies were all done mostly on retail investors or day traders. But in November of last year, there was this new book that came out, Selling Fast and Buying Slow, where they looked at the heuristic trading patterns of institutional buyers, the so-called smart money. They looked at 783 portfolios with an average size of the portfolios of $573 million. They looked at over 50 million fund security trading dates and 4 million trades, 2 million sells, 2.4 million buys. Got all that? Quiz coming up later. No, I'm just joking. A lot of numbers coming out. But basically, they looked at a period of time from 2001 to 2016, and they compared what professional management does compared to counterfactual. To buy another stock, you have to sell an existing stock. You have a portfolio that's almost fixed in price. So if you're going to buy another stock that you prefer, you have to sell an existing. So the question is whether it's better to have sold a different stock than the one that you're actually selling. Am I making any sense? You have a portfolio. You have to select the stock to sell. Is that the best stock to sell versus some other? You want to buy a new stock? You have to sell one of the existing ones. Is it better to sell X, Y, or Z or ABC? They looked at what they sold compared to what they could have sold. And they found that the professional money managers were very good in picking stocks. They looked at absolute, they looked at risk-adjusted returns, but when they were selling, the actual underperformance of what they sold were 50 to 110 basis points. That's 0.5% to 1.1% of what they sold compared to what they could have sold. And remember, when they look at what they could have sold, they're not looking at ABC versus XYZ. They're looking at ABC versus every other stock in the portfolio. They picked stocks which were not the best ones to perform. Remember what Fama and French found in the efficient model when they looked at professional money managers? They found that fewer than 7% actually earned their fees. 93% underperformed their benchmarks. He shared the Nobel Prize in 2013 for showing that. Only 1 or 2% of professional money managers do significantly better than their benchmark, which that 50 to 100 basis points, that 0.5% to 1.1%, is very critically important when you're buying and selling stocks. So what do you do? When I'm looking at a portfolio and about to change a stock in a portfolio, what do you look at? Most of the times you look at stocks that are up 50% from their buy price. That's typical of professional money managers. Or you look at what's 50% down from its buy price. I think that's a natural tendency to look at those stocks first. And when I need to raise cash for our clients, I look at that in terms of that way. I look first at those that are way down or for those that are way up. And I want to know why they're down and why they're up. I actually spend a fair amount of time thinking about what to sell and why to sell. And I look at the sell decision before I look at the buy decision. But for most portfolio managers, they're looking at the buy decision, spending the time on the buy, and then Once they make up their mind they're going to buy XYZ, then they decide what they're going to sell. They're very, very good at picking stocks, but as a group, they lost their edge when they sold. You can randomly pick out a stock out of their portfolio. Pick out a random stock. Pick it out by a dartboard and sell that. And you come up with 0.5% or 1% better performance from that trade. Think about that. It's all in the selling. A very, very careful process for buying, but a very sloppy process for selling. Very fast process. And the tendency is to do that. My tendency is to look at what's up, what's down, but I usually look at what I want to sell before I decide what I'm going to buy. And so I end up with cash in accounts sometimes. Anyway, just for the information and what makes a difference between those who outperform and those who underperform. I'll be back next week with another guest. Wasn't Alex great? You should contact Polyverse and set up your computers. Till then, have a great weekend and a great week.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you'd like Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com. The information shared in the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again next Saturday at noon for more About Money with Mike Adams, here on AM 1590. The Answer. The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.